Hello again, this is Michael Wojcik with your Our Town Legislative Rundown. And this is an egg. What does an egg have to do with this rundown? Well, let's talk about that. Recently, the state budget surplus forecast came out and it went down slightly from $17.6 billion to $17.5, but it was actually an improvement. And the reason why it went down is because for the first time in 20 years, the state estimate is treating inflation fairly. Previously, before Governor Walz signed House File 35 on February 21st, inflation was included on the revenue side, but not on the expenses. Now, if you've gone out to purchase one of these lately, you know that inflation and expenses is a real thing, especially over time. Now, the state budget surplus is projected using inflation in both the income and expense side, so it's a much fairer number. Under the old formula, the surplus would have gone up by about $1.5 billion, but under the new formula, we have a more fair number to look at. House File 1589, sponsored by Representative Peggy Bennett out of Albert Lea, would help Minnesota to create more special education teachers and give some tools to allow that to happen and to allow us to grow our own. We understand throughout Minnesota there's all kinds of teacher shortages, but probably the most critical shortages in special education. This is a bill with bipartisan support. It's moved from the House Education Policy Committee and it's now on to the House Education Finance Committee. File 1653 is something that could potentially help a lot of Rochester households, and that's because more and more people are renting. Currently, the renter's tax credit, which is actually a property tax refund, gets done in the fall. And what this bill would do is it would move it to be consistent with income tax filings, and that could potentially help more people realize that it's available and capitalize on that. Being a city nerd, I can't help but talk about the bills that were introduced in the House and Senate that would fund a study that would look at converting I-94 between Minneapolis and St. Paul into a boulevard. I know it sounds crazy at first. That only makes me want to talk about it more. There are some really good reasons why this might be done. The first is the creation of the interstate absolutely devastated communities of color in the Twin Cities, especially the Rondo area. Converting this to a boulevard is a lot cheaper than putting a cap over it, which is being discussed in the Rondo area. Just that short stretch would be about $500 million. And finally, the opportunity to create a lot of developable area in a really high demand urban center can offer some great returns. It's not going to happen for a long time, but it's interesting that it's part of the discussion. Why do we care about that here in Rochester? Well, the reality is we have some similar places that we can look at this. It's already happening on Broadway Avenue, formerly US 63. There's opportunity for something like this perhaps on Highway 14 through the south part of Rochester. And finally, the area around St. Mary's might be ripe to put a lid over the freeway at some point because, again, that is incredibly valuable land. It's fun to talk about these things. This is only a study, but I just had to bring it up. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you with our next Our Town Legislative Rundown. Now I need to go put my egg back in the safe.